Syrian Druze cities have apparently asked the Israelis to please be occupied, while the SNA and the SDF might have finally come to terms, and the second phase of the civil war might be over. At least there's hope for this as of now. At the same time, Russia tries to save its bases in the country while it still evacuates whatever it has there. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened in the past few days in this situation report about the civil war in Syria. The United Kingdom has said that they consider taking HTS off the terrorist list. This is considered to be in the future. Right now with the United States, that seems highly unlikely. At the same time, Arab nations as well as Turkey and Russia are already having diplomatic relations with the new government, or the government that is in the process of establishing itself in Damascus, while the West so far has not moved yet. In the political sphere, so domestic policies in the new Syria, the de-Baathification will not happen. That's what is currently being published to save government structures to avoid a complete disintegration. The new rulers have set up some new administrators, but they keep basically everyone else in place to guarantee the continued working of the state and to re-establish services. Of course, criminals are supposed to be hunted down and punished. Whoever committed crimes against humanity, torture, murder, etc., but who was just a Baath Party member will not be punished according to what is currently published. HTS is still trying to consolidate its hold. Right now there are news about conversations with the Southern Operations Room. Those are the rebels that have established themselves in the south and then advanced towards Damascus before HTS has arrived there. Right now, we also see that different factions of the rebels are acting differently as of now. This is also illustrating itself in events like this, that initially when the new Syrian prime minister showed up, he had the Shahada on a flag next to the Syrian, and the next time it was only the Syrian flag after backlash from the public, where a lot of people were angry about this. Also, we see Al-Jolani now in civilian clothing, no longer in combat gear, also trying to shape his new image. Obviously, at this point, we have to say this doesn't say much, except that they want to have a certain appearance. What they will intend in total is far from clear as of now, but at least for the moment, they clearly want to show that they are moderate, that they can be talked to, etc. This doesn't mean, though, that this is universal. There are videos of ISIS flags being shown in the country. There are also events like this where a Christian journalist for a previous government radio station said that she was asked by a rebel what religious sect and what's her religious background. Basically, seeing here what was asked, she was asked whether she's part of the minority, one of the minority groups. So far, this supposedly has never happened to her, showing that some rebels are not following the rules that are currently being published. There are also rumors about killings, extrajudicial killings that are happening, etc. The new government has issued a warning. They demand that everyone follow their orders. They are threatening that you will be punished if you don't follow the orders. That includes asking women for modesty, but obviously also not to plunder, not to do extrajudicial killings, basically to keep order. Whoever doesn't do that is supposed to be punished, but we'll have to see to which it turns out. As said, the government clearly wants to appear moderate at this very moment. At the same time, the drug empire of Bashar al-Assad was found. They found fabrication places, they found smuggle operations, they found depots. We're talking about the Captagon. Captagon is, from what I saw, basically an amphetamine derivative. So it's somewhat related to amphetamines and has a somewhat similar effect. And this was supposedly what the Syrian government, or especially the Bashar al-Assad clan, financed itself off over the past few years. Also, interesting they published that they will stop the centralist socialist economic system and will switch to a free market system that will allow a free trade, free operation of businesses. This is currently being said, another change in the way Syria is supposed to be handled in the future. Right now, the government is also trying, or the new government is also trying to re-establish control at various points. They have re-established checkpoints, especially in Damascus, where, according to reports, they were trying to confiscate as much of the plundered material before. As when the Southern Operation Room entered Damascus, wide-scale looting started, which was forbidden by HTS and which was stopped as soon as HTS entered the capital. But until that point, looting had already happened. We also see Islamist groups popping up at shrines and issuing threats. So what we need to understand at this point is that HTS might be the leaders. HTS might be in the overall command. They will likely influence and have a say over who is ruling the country, but they were part of a coalition, maybe the dominant part, but there are factions that they fought beside in the past that don't follow their rules, that intend to do something different, and we'll have to see to which degree this will lead to additional conflicts in the future. Speaking about additional conflicts, we had the SDF and the SNA going basically full-scale war against each other. By now, the SNA has fully consolidated the control over the Manjib area here. Before the SDF, so what is here in yellow, the SDF has said they have signed an agreement to withdraw with the SNA, so that the SDF is withdrawing from that area. And this was supposed to, this according to reports, were happening after with the help of the US, the United States, that were consolidating, that were advising both and helping that agreement to come into place. Part of it was a 4-day ceasefire as well that has started on the 12th and is supposed to last until the 16th. Part of it is that all the SDF troops and their families are to withdraw from Manjib and to be allowed to withdraw from that. Also, the Tishin Dam is meant to be demilitarized. I think this should be this one here. It's meant to be demilitarized so the civilians can take over and run it and run its operations and to secure its installation. By now, though, there are videos showing that the SNA has occupied it in breach of that agreement. Deir ez-Zor is also under control of HTS by now. In the area, the militias had switched side, the Arab militias that were part of the SDF alliance. Among the militias switching were also some from the eastern side of the Euphrates, which would basically give HTS a bridgehead into SDF territory over the Euphrates, and that obviously endangers the situation of the SDF. Generally, the past few days have shown more and more Arab militias switching from the SDF, which was Kurdish dominated, but had other tribes and other ethnicities and religions in it as well. Increasingly, the Arab militias were switching over to the HTS, their loyalty towards HTS. There were also mass protests against the SDF in the city of Raqqa. Here, the mob even attacked the SDF forces and on video seemed to drive them away with their enragement. But by now, the SDF tried to reconsolidate, and there were reports that to do that, for instance, they burned down the house of a commander of an Arab militia that switched sides to HTS. It seems though that the SDF has understood where the tide is going now, and they found an agreement with HTS that would define how the country is going to develop in the future. Part of that agreement supposedly is that the PKK is going to be disbanded. Now, PKK is obviously the big issue that Turkey has with the Kurdish administered regions of Syria, as PKK is a terrorist organization responsible for tens of thousands of deaths inside of Turkey. According to the agreement, the Kurds would disband the PKK, which would then give Turkey probably, or has the chance of giving Turkey what it wants. The Kurds would receive a semi-autonomous region for administration, so they would have whatever semi-autonomous means. And the SDF, and that's the interesting part, so this SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces that are dominated by the Kurds, would become a part of the Free Syrian Army, basically of supposedly the new national army that is going to be found, which would also mean they do not have their own military anymore once the integration is done. As a result of this, the flag of the new Syria, green, white, and black, was already raised in Raqqa among the buildings administered by the SDF as well. So, and as we can see here, the Arab civilians are cheering to that side here in the area. Also, part of the agreement supposedly is that 50% of the oil income, and the region here is rich in oil, 50% of the oil income will be handed over to the central government, but also thus meaning that the Kurdish administered regions would have a sizable chunk of the oil income as well. Part of that deal is also that the SDF is releasing all the political prisoners and those who had protested before that were arrested, and all Iraqi Kurds are being deported to Iraq to get rid of them here in this agreement. So far, that seems to be holding up. I do not have full confirmation about every detail, and obviously we also do not have the confirmation whether Turkey will agree to that fully, even maybe withdraw from the areas like here in the north. We do not have an agreement. We do not have the details to which degree Kurdistan, the Kurdish people will be allowed to self-administrate themselves, that they will be allowed to keep everything east of the Euphrates seems highly unlikely. So we'll have to see where the new borders are being drawn, but that could obviously lead to additional troubles. But at least for now, there seems to be a chance to stop the civil war before a second phase happens and before the SDF are overrun by the SNA with Turkish aid. Israel is also still operating inside of Syria. The air campaign is mostly over, though. There have been single air attacks still happening, but the majority of the air offensive is over. The Israelis said they destroyed 86% of the Syrian air defense. Among that, also 47 radar stations. They destroyed 80% of all the Pantsir S1 that the Syrians had. They destroyed 90% of all the SA-17, the Buk system that the Syrians have, both fairly effective systems that could have threatened Israelis in theory. Israel is now saying they have full air supremacy over Syria. They can do whatever they want. They can fly wherever they want. They have full control over the airspace over Syria as of now. This will obviously be important in potential future confrontations with Iran. This will allow them to operate over Syria without the Syrians being able to interfere with them. They might operate intelligence gathering planes. They might operate tankers over there. All of this will allow them to hit Iran far more effectively in future confrontations than they have been in the past, as the Syrian Air Force, the Syrian Air Defense, and the Russians, for that matter, won't be able to interfere with them anymore. The Israelis used 1,800 bombs in their air offensive, showing the intensity over just a few days. But they themselves say they didn't manage to destroy everything, just 80 to 90%. That's one of the reasons why, according to reports, the border posts into Lebanon were also destroyed to make it more difficult for Hezbollah to gain heavy weapons in the current chaos and to transport them into Lebanon. Israel also is, according to reports, Israel has already built a road to the newly occupied positions on Mount Hermon and in the former demilitarized zone. As we can see here, this is supposedly showing the freshly built road that was done there. This would be an indication that the Israelis plan to stay there for a while. The Israeli local media were reporting that local media in the area were reporting that the Israelis are talking to local elders to coordinate with them. They are saying that which towns they are supposed to enter. They are warning them not to fire upon them, and at the same time it's being reported that they disarm locals wherever they appear, so they take away their guns. This is supposedly one of the reasons why some are fleeing to not be under Israeli occupations without having arms themselves. At the same time, Some of the local people are already asking HTS to intervene and help them against the Israelis. But while this is happening, so while locals supposedly are asking the new government or the government that is in the process of establishing itself for military aid against the Israelis, this video is being spread around here. And it's, according to it, the inhabitants of 6 local Druze villages are asking Israel to take over. Now, this was spread with various different claims that they asked to be annexed and so on. I do not see that, honestly. I see that they say Israel is the lesser evil because they fear for their wives and children because of the Islamists that take over the country. So basically better occupied by Israel than by the Islamists. That they want to be annexed, I have not seen in this context here. I tried to verify it because it sounds outrageous to think that in Syria people are asking Israel to please take over. This seems to be propaganda. I tried to find out much. The problem is I haven't really found anyone refuting it, but I have not seen serious media picking it up and confirming it either at that point. So to what I found, it seems somewhat credible. One of the towns mentioned is Haber, and we can see here it's really close to the Israeli occupied Golan Heights, or the Israeli Golan Heights, however you want to see it. This is one of the places. The Israelis are up here on Mount Hermon, so they are very close to the area where the Israelis are already operating, and there they are supposedly asked for basically Israeli protections. This is also in connection what we have here. Claims that local Druze are saying that we want them to take over to protect us from the rebels. Druze, and this is something we need to talk about the local situation here. The Golan is inhabited by the Druze, and some of them have been conquered by Israel when Israel took the Golan Heights in the Six-Day War. Since then, the Israelis have annexed it. I think in 1981, they have annexed the Golan, and they offered the local inhabitants citizenship. Some took them, but a lot of them didn't. But as now it is local Israel, according to Israeli understanding, they are being offered all the benefits of a welfare state, from medical treatment to subsidies, to financial aid, to minimum wage. Everything they were offered, that Israeli citizens are also being offered, while basically their tribesmen on the other side of the ceasefire line were not offering the same, while they were even involved in a civil war over the past 13 years. In the past, a lot of those Druze did not take Israeli citizenships, despite it being offered. Other Druze tribes, by the way, stayed in Israel after its founding, have become citizens. They play a big role in the Israeli military, so they have fully integrated. They are part of the Israeli society. But those that were taken here, a lot of them are not. Some claims, some analysis is saying this is happening because they are too afraid that in case Syria ever gets it back, they will be punished for taking citizenship. But the interesting thing here is a German article is saying that the Druze have started to increasingly take citizenship since the civil war has begun, for the reason that apparently they saw the benefits of being in Israel. So what we have is, on the Golan, we have some Druze that are used to 40 years of being administered by the Israelis. If we take the full Six-Day War, even over 50 years by now. While on the other hand, their tribesmen were under government by Bashar al-Assad and his father. So this might have led to some of this. This might give it some credibility, simply as the Druze have a different understanding of the implementation of Islamic laws, of society and so on, than the majority of the Sunnis, at least to what I've seen here. So this gives that claim that some of them might be so afraid of Islamists taking over that they prefer to be under Israeli administration. That gives it some credibility, especially as we see that they have basically people they are related to, they can talk to, and they tell them how it is to live 50 years under the Israelis. So this seems to give it some credibility. As of now, unfortunately, I'm not able to confirm this fully. Still, I tried, but as of now, I would not sign it and say 100% they actually want Israeli to occupy them. But from what I see, I think it's 80% likely that this is actually the truth, that Druze societies in Syria have asked basically Israel to take over the administration, to occupy them, or if you want to dramatize it, to annex them, even though I have not seen that word being used in the original. Still though, massive developments here as well, and quite impressive developments, if we want to have it this way. Then, though, we see others trying to interfere as well. Khamenei, for instance, the spiritual leader and effective dictator of Iran, on the 11th said in a speech that he hopes and he is convinced that the Syrian youth will undoubtedly rise up to free the occupied areas. In this, he probably meant the freshly occupied areas here on the Golan, probably all of the Golan, that they will liberate from likely the Israelis, and he said Iran will happy to help them. From my understanding, he's basically hoping that the Islamic regime in Iran will be able to keep influence to a certain degree inside of Syria by their joint opposition towards Israel, by their joint hostility towards Israel, and that to at least some degree the influence of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps might return into Syria. Then we have to talk about Russia. Russian troops are continuing to evacuate from their positions deeper into Syria. Convoys, there are videos of convoys all over Syria that are going towards the coast. During the same time, Khmeimim, the airfield that the Russians have here, is still being evacuated. Still, the transport planes are in the place and are flying stuff out. In latest satellite pictures and drone pictures, it showed that the S-400 system that was there is dismantled, is no longer ready to fire. They are clearly evacuating the S-400 system as well, basically getting it out of Syria at this moment. Still, though, while this sounds that they completely have given it up, by the way, here we have another video of troops being evacuated. While this sounds like it, we have Bloomberg reporting that the Russians try to make a deal with the new government to keep their bases after all. And they sound that they are optimistic that something like this might be possible. They've switched very fast from the support for Bashar al-Assad to acknowledging the rebels as the new leadership, with justified problems, as Lavrov said it. And the interesting part is here that Al-Jolani said in the past, a couple of days ago, that he basically says he will act in the interest of Syria, not in the interest of other nations. So this means if Russia can offer Syria something that attractive, that for Al-Jolani, he will believe that this is to the benefit of Syria, there's a real chance that the Russians might keep their base in Syria after all, even though we are far from having sign of this. Russia also claimed they have to be there and they are willing to help against fighting ISIS, which is still not defeated. So to fight the Islamic State, here Russia was there to do that, they claim, and they're willing to continue it. And here actually Israel might have led to a situation that makes the new government inclined to keep the Russians more likely, as Israel has basically taken out the conventional Syrian armed forces, everything that is more modern than them. They have taken out the Air Force. So even if there are some pilots that have switched side that are willing to fly for the new government, and the new government is willing to use them, like it was, for instance, in Iran as well, where Shah educated, where pilots for the Iranian Air Force that were pilots under the Shah returned to fight for their motherland when Iraq attacked. Even if they find someone like this, there's simply no more planes. There's no more helicopters to support the ground forces against the Islamic State. So with the complete destruction of the conventional forces of the Syrian armed forces, this might have helped the Russian argument that Russia is still needed in the region, because the Syrian armed forces, the future ones, will not be able to support themselves out of the air in the current situation. But still, Khmeimim is very vulnerable. Numerous drone flights over the airfield have shown that. It shows they are being published in the past few days, showing how drones are flying over the airfield and looking down. That helped us see that the Russians still have Sukhoi 35 there, Sukhoi 34 and Sukhoi 24. They still have planes there, combat planes as well. But this means that it shows the vulnerability of the area there for a potential attack with drones. HTS has proven to be very disciplined, but it's part of an alliance in which a lot of parts of that alliance have serious issues with Russia and have proven to be less disciplined than HTS. So the situation, it's far from certain that the base, even if the new government is willing to allow Russia to keep it, that it will be usable for Russia, simply because of the threat of, for instance, FPV drones throwing themselves into the plains in this. But right now we are in a situation that the hesitation by the West could be used by Russia. If the West is isolating HTS and Russia doesn't, but is offering something instead, this is far from impossible for Russia, that it might end up with keeping the bases inside of Syria, despite having supported the previous dictator and and fought the current government. So right now the West might have a chance to make a deal there, maybe organizing something of grain transport from Ukraine to Syria that would help both Ukraine selling its grain, that would help Syria having allowing the new government to make sure it can feed the population, one of the most essential things in any nation, and especially in a nation that is on the verge of collapse after the civil war has ended with a complete collapse of the current government. This would secure them. This would obviously allow them to consolidate, and it would allow the West to gain influence there and prevent Russia gaining influence and keeping its airbase. Because right now the Russians only have one alternative for their air transports. That is Libya. In Libya, they have airfields under their control or under Haftar's control, who is allied to them. This is the only area where the Russian planes can still fly without having to refuel, for instance, in Turkey. So if they lose Hmymin, they will have to talk to Libya, where the United Arab Emirates also have a big influence, and thus it's less likely of Russia having the same liberty to operate there in the region. Also, in the past, the Russians have kind of prepared for that. They have built up airfields in Libya that can be used for maintaining and for refueling and for landing Russian planes. So Russia would have an alternative, but not a secure one, not an established one, and not a convenient one as the airbase in Syria in Hmymin is. Port Sudan could be used for the fleet. The Russian government has lately supported the Sudanese armed forces in its fight against the rapid support forces. So there might be some way, but then again, we are talking about an unstable country where the current government is actually on the offensive, but where there's no comparable agreement yet, where all the infrastructure has to be rebuilt again. So to come to a conclusion, the new government of Syria is still in a process of finding itself, of establishing itself, of negotiating among itself what influence, which group, and to which degree the influence will be spread around here. There is good hope for Syria in regards to avoiding a continuation of the civil war, at least according to the proclamations a few hours ago. The green, white, and black flag is being raised all over Syria, basically taking away the claim, the threat of a continued civil war against the SDF and the rest of the country. So there's hope that the civil war might end fairly soon. Israel, on the other hand, seems to be preparing to stay on Syrian soil for a continued time, for quite some additional time. Supposedly, some local Druze towns have asked to be occupied by the Israelis to basically protect them from the new Syrian government, and Russia is continuing, even despite negotiations to keep its bases. They are still continuing to evacuate material and troops from Syria, but they are negotiating right now to be able to keep this. Potentially, the West is wasting an opportunity to engage with the new Syria to gain additional influence, but we'll have to see what is going to continue here, how the situation will develop. And if you don't want to miss that, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment. What do you think about the current developments, and what do you think about the Druze towns asking Israel apparently to be occupied? If you want to support the channel, this channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.